All right, welcome to our talk on the four elements in our series on the basic practices. This is Prater Nubis.
I'm Sora Kandrona.
And this is our Temple of Limitless Light. And we have a Facebook group that will be in the comments. You can join and at least get notifications of when we're having these talks, and you can participate via Zoom for most of them. So tonight, we thought the next step after we went over the LBRP and Kabalistic cross is to discuss the elements, because those form the very basis of a practice. So why don't we start with the Kabalistic cross, get centered and grounded in our highest selves. Visualize yourself growing larger and larger, up into outer space till the earth is just but a small ball beneath your feet. Above your head, visualize a sphere of limitless light, of pure brilliance. Reach up, touch the light, bring it down to your forehead. Eto. Now bring the light down through the center of your body and ground it into the small ball beneath your feet, the center of the earth, so that you're standing in a column of light, connecting above and below. Bring the light up to your left shoulder, to a beautiful blue light, the light of Hesed, of unselfish giving. Bring the light across to your right shoulder, to a ball of fiery red energy representing Ura in your will. Leolam. Amen. So the four elements. When we're studying the tree of life, probably perhaps my book. Here we go. So here is the tree of life from one of my notebooks. Starting with Keller at the top. See, the four elements is the relationship of four. It's not just the earthly elements that we think of, fire and wind and ocean water and gemstones in the ground. It's about a relationship of four, as if you divided the universe into four things, a relationship of four. Like when we do the Lesser Banishing Ritual of Pentagram, we go to the four directions. And we divide our space by four. But why? Well, if you think about Keller as absolute unity, it's a relationship of one. And that's cool. And that's ultimately, you want to have that perspective, the pleroma, the absolute unity of being. But as far as doing ritual work, it's kind of hard to do much with that concept. You can, but it's difficult. The next you have Keller and Hockman. And then you have a polarity, you have a two. So you have like a yin and yang relationship. You could do a little bit more with that, but still you're kind of limited. Then you get to Bina. So now you have a relationship of three things. And that's useful, but it's so abstract. You've got the thought, the thinker, and the realization of the thought. You've got, I guess, mother, father, and child. You've got sulfur, salt, and mercury. That's more useful, but still it's really abstract at that point. But when we get down to Hesed, we come across the abyss, which acts as sort of like a mirror. When you approach the abyss itself, it's like, going through the looking glass. It's very difficult above the abyss. But when you get below the abyss to his head, you get to a relationship of 4. 4 is really easy to work with. And if you think about it, that's one of the things, the first manifestation. You have a 4-dimensional universe at that point. You have 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. And so with the relationship of 4, we can really like sink our minds into it as a way to create ritual meaning and to understand our universe and how things manifest. So on the one hand, there is what we commonly think of. We think of the element of fire. We think of fire and those qualities that fire has, of being explosive, of burning through its boundaries, of consuming as it expands. But it's also an abstract concept of our will, of our first motivation, of if you think about the creation of the universe as a story, and you think about the 4 elements as a story. First, there's, say, the Big Bang. Let's just go with that. Assume the Big Bang story is mostly true. It's the best thing that we have so far. So the universe explodes into being, right? Boom, a huge fiery expansion of creativity and rushing out there. And since that force expands, it's going to immediately create its opposite, a contraction, right? If you create light, you're going to, by necessity, to create shadow. It's just simply going to happen. You know, things bring their opposite into being. I don't have it. So let me get something. So fire expands out and creates the universe and immediately creates its opposite, which is water. Fire is expansive and creative and consuming its boundaries. Water conforms to its boundaries. It envelops. It takes the shape of the container. You say these things are opposites, but they're not really opposites. If you think about this as an example. This is a box. I keep my favorite tarot deck in it, so I've had a really long time. Now, what makes a box useful is that it has a hole in the middle. It contains something, right? A box has an inside and an outside. Well, with the lid off, it really doesn't. Kind of, but you get the point. But if I were to use the box, to make the box useful, I have to put the lid on, right? I have to separate the inside and the outside. But as you notice, the inside and the outside arise together. If I create an inside to be useful to hold my cards, I also create an outside. So we think about these things as being opposites. But since they arise together, they're just 2 parts of the same thing, just like a stick has 2 ends. And the same thing goes with you. Well, if you see yourself as having an inside and an outside, that's legit, we do. There's the insides of us and the outside, but they're really part of the same manifestation. That you can't have an inside without an outside. You can't have water without fire, and you can't have fire without water. Those are the first 2 elements. Now, if you can imagine them coming together, fire and water together, creates the 3rd element, which is air. Right? Things are starting to cool and take shape. You have an air element. It's both has the power of the will, which is fire, and the power of the emotions, which is water. We get air, which is more thinking, organization. And at that point, we can start narrating what's going on. And then the 4th element is earth, which represents the first 3 combined with the power of spirit, where things are actually manifested. So the elements arise together. They're mutually dependent, and they're a story of the creation of the universe. So when we work with the elements, we consider them both their earthly counterpart, but also they're part of a creation myth, and they're a relationship of four. It's if you divided the universe into four areas. So when we do the Lesser Banishing Ritual, the Pentagram, we have a slightly different elemental arrangement. We go to the east where the sun rises, right? The sun is rising. We're waking up. It's morning time. We're becoming aware, right? Our awareness is rising within us. We have woken up. So that's the intellect. So air is to the east. There's also the Greek qualities. Air from the east is considered to be hot and wet, east wind. The four winds theories also comes into that. Then we go to the south. The sun at that point is at the highest point of the day. It's at noon. Things are hot. It's the hottest point of the day. It's the highest point. That's when probably the most active fire or will is fired up at that time. Then we go to the west and we invoke water. The sun is going down. Things are cooling off. The south wind is supposed to be hot and dry, fire. The west wind is cool and wet, water. Sun is going down, we're starting to go to sleep. We're starting to slow down. And then we go to the north. The north wind is considered to be cold and dry. At that point, the sun is on the other side of the planet, like at midnight, say. And so we're asleep, we're at the most lethargic time of day. So we can connect with the elements when we do the LBRP, and also throughout the day if you want to practice something like the Liber Resh. Do you have any thoughts I'd like to add?
We just talked about how the sun moves through all of the different directions, the time of day. And it all sounded good to me.
Okay. So that is how you would use the four elements in ritual, and that's how they're used in the LBRP. And there's a practice called Liber Resh, where you salute the sun 4 times a day, depending on its station. In the morning, Hail unto thee who art raw in the rising. At noon, Hail unto thee who art Hathor. And with the sundown, you hail Tomb. And before you go to bed or at midnight, it's Kathra. These are 4 incarnations or 4 modes of the sun god. And so that's the relationship of 4 for the 4 elements. So why don't we talk a little bit about elemental qualities? Because I want to first show you that it's a pattern, it's a relationship of ideas. So fire, its quality is to be sudden and explosive. It represents the will. It burns through its boundaries as its creative expression. It cannot be contained. It either will consume its restrictions as it expands or it dies. Fire is the most active and relentless of the elements, but its energies are soon spent if not nourished. Fire consumes as it creates. It's continually redefining itself through action. Fire reduces and refines ideas to their most essential essence, to their most basic truth. Fire rules decision-making as well as insight and sudden realization. But sometimes people put knowledge as a fire element quality. Knowledge, if you're talking about intuitive knowledge, like things that you just know, that you feel to be true, not things that you have memorized so much. It's knowledge that comes out of your essential being, things that you feel to be true, that you just act on. And so in Kabbalah, again, we have 4 worlds. And fire corresponds to the fiery world of Atziluth, which is the fire world. And when we study Kabbalah, that's where the divine is supposed to exist in a continual state of absolute unity and bliss. The masculine and feminine there are united in a continuous process of lovemaking, whose energy vibrates out and creates the operant field of the universe. And so we have 10 God names, and also we have association of the wands and the tarot relate to absolute and to the element of fire. The next element to consider is, of course, water. In Kabbalah, it's the Briatic world, the world of the archangels, where the inspiration and will comes from absolute. It starts to coalesce. The energy, like the explosive energy of fire, creation of the universe, boom, goes out. It has to be reflected and contained. So fire being the will, water being the love that contains it and directs it. Water is passive and receptive. It is everything the fire is not. It can be thought of as fire's opposite. Water conforms to the boundaries it encounters, and is not as initially active as fire, but is more enduring. Water has mass and weight, and fire does not. It is given time, water can wear down the strongest stone and create wonders like the Grand Canyon. Water is the element of feeling and reception. It is quiet and understands through empathy. It listens and reflects to what it hears. Emotional intelligence can create wonders that do not conform to logic. Water also rules creativity, memory, understanding, and understanding comes through using the inspiration of fire. So water has those qualities, the Briatic world of the archangels that are going to contain and express the inspiration of the divine from the world of fire, and also the cups and the tarot. 1 through 10 cards relate to the 10 Sephirah in the world of Bria. So fire and water, wands and cups, then we get to the swords. Air is the most penetrating of the elements and rules the realms of thought and reason. Air does not have the passion of fire nor the endurance of water, but strikes a balance. It's considered to be an active element. Fire supplies the insight and direction, water the reflection and creativity. Air seeks to explain through reason and form a plan of action. Reason gives names to things, definition, and setting limitations. It establishes order. Also, air also rules communication, learning, and also strife. So when you look at the tarot and you see the swords cards have a lot of strife and battles, and they're a little bit more strict because air is, if you use the intellect, you are going to divide things into separate groups or combine them. That's why the sword is its symbol. If you say, okay, those are mammals, they're not reptiles. You've taken a sword and drawn a line, separated those two groups. And so within that, you say those are dogs, that's my dog Spot. You're separating things out. But you're also joining Spot to the world of dogs and of mammals. It has this organizing principle that's the symbol of the sword. Swords can cut and they can also unite things together. That's the element of air, and that's how we use it. And then the element of earth. Oh yeah, and yeah, Yetzirah is the Kabalistic world of air. So the realm of earth is Asaya, and that's where things actually manifest. The inspiration of fire, the love and containment, direction of water, the planning of air, and then the manifestation on the earthly realm. So fire inspires, water feels, air thinks, and earth lives. Earth is the end product of the action of the first three elements. So that's an important thing to consider. A lot of times we think, oh, earth, that's a boring element, but that is the thing that's created by the action of the other three. The element of earth rules our activities in the world, our work, our health, and our practical projects that we hope to manifest and experience. Earth is the most dense and complex of the elements and considered a passive element, in that it is what you create of it. Earth can be refined, shaped, divided, and nourished in a myriad of forms. And also, an important part of the earth element is society and culture, other people that we interact with. If you look at a lot of the pentacle cards in the tarot, the 1 through 10 and the court cards, there are a lot about interactions with people, learning things, doing business, reaching out to people, sharing, ancestry. All of those things come out on those cards, because what's really the most important thing in the earthly realm is our relationship to other people. Everything of value that we have, or every strong experience that we have, comes to us by ways of other people and our interactions with them. So those are the 4 elements, and we would use them in ritual a myriad of ways. The first is when we do something like the Lesser Banishing Ritual, the Pentagram, we are invoking and cleaning those 4 areas of our lives and getting things organized. We call them up, and by doing Banishing Earth, we're basically cleaning out the different elements. Now, this is the first way that we learn to interact with elements. And if you study tarot, you're working with elements there because of the elemental qualities of the 1 through 10 cards. The small cards, the pip cards, are 10 and 4 suits. So it's the 10 Sephiroth throughout 4 worlds, the whole pattern of creation. The court cards are, you have 4 cards and 4 suits, so you get 16. They represent an element combined with another element. So we're starting to get some interesting complexities there. We have to learn this way of thinking where we think about an element within a Sephiroth, an element within an element. Things, as we get more specific, we build ritual meaning and things become more and more powerful. There are rituals where you invoke a specific element. The greater ritual of the Pentagram, which we have videos up of demonstrating, where we invoke that the personification of that particular element in the world of Isaiah, in the world of earth. The 4 elemental kings, which are the earthly reflection of the 4 great archangels that we work with when we do the Lesser Banishing Ritual. And so over and over again, there's these ways that we can incorporate this relationship of 4 into our ritual work to create very specific ritual effects that we'd like to experience. Anything?
So, right. It's what you're talking about a lot is there are a lot of different layers and there are a lot of correspondences to the tree of life. So it is, in our system at least, it's good to understand the relationship that it has with the tree of life and how that progression happens. You talked about the creation of one element to another. I've seen a lot of other kind of discussions of how one element leads to another and blah, blah, blah. I think there's maybe no one right way to do that, but it's always good to have some reflection that, here's one model. Here's one way to think about that development of the elements coming forth from one another. And so, the concept of elements repeats itself again and again and again throughout all cultures and all times. We see this, and it's because it's really core and foundational. And so with anything that you would consider to be basic learning, you'll hear the same story, right? Again and again and again, you'll hear these same stories. We're going to talk about earth, air, fire, and water today. But then there's these kind of layers, these peels that we come to each time. And the more of those layers that we can begin to grasp and understand, the more that I think that we begin to have mastery over that element. And then also the other thing is we've been conceptualizing it really a lot. It's like something like you can at some point in time and go, that's an emotion, right? You can point to something, that's my thinking, that's this and this and this, and all these different sorts of words that we can use that point inward towards a specific thing. But the thing that it's pointing in towards is an experience.
Right.
Really, it's an experience of what it feels like to have an excessively watery day. Right? Today was a kind of watery day. Not just because it was raining outside, but because I was wishy-washy and couldn't make some decisions and maybe felt a little moody. And it was just a little watery, as opposed to yesterday where I got up and had a list of things to do and felt like I was just going to get it done until I got it done, set a goal at the end of chocolate cake. And move myself in that direction, and so what does that feel like inside of us? How can we really relate to that? Because if you can stand in the direction, you're standing in the direction and you're saying the words, you're doing the visualizations, you're adding visualizations that are non-typical, they're unique to you, maybe, this is what I like to see here of rushing wind of a tornado, hurricane, standing in the middle of a Tallahassee storm, right? And, this is what I like. So you stand there and you have all of these different stacked conceptions. And so what is that doing? It's taking you to a place where you're embodying the felt experience of that. And so whatever kind of mental thing you need to reproduce that energetic frequency within yourself where you're resonant, right? You've done everything that you know how to do, but what you're doing is you're trying to dial in like a radio to that frequency. And that's when I think that, I would call it purification, but that's when the magic starts, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could call it the lesser purification ritual, the pentagram.
Right.
Better. But then people wouldn't know what we're talking about.
You have to be traditional and stick with the language. But yeah. Yeah, but I'm always going to take it that way. I'm always going to look at it from that lens of how we can actually have an experience of being what we're being. And in my mind, that's the way to potentiate the intention of whatever it is that you're trying to do. Particularly with a ritual like the LBRP, right, which is specifically oriented towards getting you into alignment with the four elements. And that alignment is in and of itself protective. When you have that alignment, it acts as
like crystallization, sort of hard to move.
Your energy expands to fill the space.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your energy is expanded to fill the space, then that's your energy. And it's not really even you, it's you channeling earth, air, fire, and water. And of course, in that channeling, there's spirit. That's the underlying context. So we haven't really, could you maybe speak on how spirit relates? Were you getting to that?
Yes. So the fifth element, the element of spirit, pentagram in front of me. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, where's the pentagram?
So if we look at our
find one.
pentagrams that we are using, you see at the top is the little wheel, the wheel of spirit. And this is from last week's handout that you can find. I should attach those to the YouTube.
Yeah.
So spirit is at the top. It's the head, basically, of the person who's standing with their arms and legs out to symbolize the human being. So spirit is the fifth element that runs between the other four and sort of acts as a grease that allows them to interact to create the world. Basically, it's the four elements, the universe divided by four, but also keeps them separated enough that they can have their own unique and have their qualities, so they don't all run together and everything turns into like a flat nothingness.
It's the playpen. That's what I call it, right? It's the safe space for all the elements to operate.
Allows them to work together and infuses them with life, with energetic life, you know. And yeah, I think one point that you bring up that's really important, that the elements are things that you experience that you can really feel. And that's like probably the main reason why we work with them first. The first set of energies that we really work with is that there's something very tangible that we can have a very solid experience with, that we can relate to. When I was trying to, that's kind of the idea I was trying to get to before, a little more abstractly, that being the fourth Sephirah. But yeah, I mean, you can really feel fire, you can feel watery, you can feel mentally air, and you can feel kind of lethargic and grounded after a big meal, perhaps, if you've taken on a lot of earth energy. Then that's
Earth
kind
of water.
yeah. And that's why we work with the elements first. They represent the qualities of the microcosm, our immediate world around us. And we can relate to them and we can connect to them. And once we have that as an experience, we can work with even more higher energies, like the elements of the energies of the planet, of the macrocosm. But we still use the elements even in that. When we work with, say, something advanced like this seniors, it's a planet within an element. So there's 7 times 4, so you get 28 different effects.
Or we work frequently with elements and elements.
Yes.
And that's kind of fundamental in our way of approaching the tarot. Is you, in the court cards, you really have to understand what an element is for the court cards. And it would be an element in a planet for pit cards, right?
There's an element within a Sephirah and then a planet as well.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot. The pit cards are the most complicated cards of the deck. But by understanding the 4 elements, you have a huge leg up on understanding the tarot.
It just makes everything else unfold.
To get away from that massive memorization of, having to learn a bunch of meanings for 78 cards. By understanding the elements, you get a huge leg up on getting what the 56 small cards are all about. Not so much the major arcana, but there's 3 elements in the major arcana. The 3 mother letters, but that's a whole other subject for another time. So that is basically what I wanted to talk about. Do you think we need to cover anything else for the 4 elements? The handout has the basic definitions.
Well, you were talking, I still don't feel perfectly complete with regards to the concept of space. That that space is something that we have in our environment, right? So I have a distance from here to here with my hands, and we're separate and distinct. And there are these discrete objects in our environment, and that's defined by the spatial relation. We can define it by a spatial relationship. So we have elements in a spatial relationship, which can be merged, which was what we just went into great detail to describe the different ways that we merge these discrete elements in space, or they can be differentiated, which is how, we separate things out so that we can understand them, we differentiate them, which is the basic alchemical process of Hermetica, right?
Right.
Separate something, purify it, get it really purified. So if you're purifying yourself towards earth and you're healing, you're doing all of this orientation within yourself, and if you're not really distinct in that, and then I'm just kind of really sort of trying to digest this concept, these different concepts of distinction and space, and how space is binding all of this together and giving it really an arena in which to operate, right? Because anything that's outside of the circle is not within your magical sphere of intent of what you're trying to produce, right? Now, by the way, folks, we take these elements to an absolutely ridiculous level in ritual, where when you're doing this, we may do very complex rituals to create these elemental vortexes in the room, and we'll create several of them to go simultaneously at the end. And then the degree of manifestation that is capable within all of those different variables is pretty extensive. I mean, I haven't reached the end of experimenting with all of those different
Right. So we have
potentials.
the greater ritual of pentagram, where we do one element, the elemental octagram, where we do an element within an element. We may invoke a whirling vortex of, say, fire energy, and then bring down on top of that a vortex of water energy, combine the two, and then you have the watery part of fire, or the Queen of Wands, and boom, creates an energetic field. And since the style of magic, we call it an eidolon, which is an image, we can then call in a spirit whose energy matches that field and add intelligence to that energy that we brought up. We can also create gateways, the triangle gateways that we're using for the rising on the plains, for the Nakian Aethers, to go to the four worlds. We can, of course, open up Asaya, Yetzira, Bria, and Absolute as a way to rise energetically, to do magic within there. We can combine a planet's energy with an element to create a senior, similar to and then you get 28. And then it goes on from there. But it's a very powerful tool if you understand the basics of the element, and you can get that feeling, you can connect to an elemental energy. Then it becomes available as a magical tool to create an enormous number of magical effects, ranging from the simple to very complicated spiritual experiences that you can use for self-transformation and to transmute your life.
Right, and not only can we do them, we do them. So, and when I say we, I mean he.
Yeah, you do it too.
So, you'll have opportunities over time to participate in these experiences and observe them and get a sense of what it feels like to be engaged with it, which is usually its own experience. But and then there are basic techniques like the LBRP, which we'll be going over again this Friday, right?
Right, this Friday. The Angel Magic class will Friday. I don't know if that's going to be recordable, because it'll be an in-person event.
Yeah, it's going to be a terrible recording. I'll just say that.
If we try to record it, it'll be outside, and we'd have to get everybody's permission. Not everybody cares to be recorded and put on YouTube.
Yeah. So, okay. So are you finished? Can we go ahead and stop and open for questions?
Yes, let's stop and have a discussion.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. We'll put the link to our Facebook group on the recording, and I'll try to get the attachment up too. Thanks for coming.